the good stuff.
Welcome back, everybody, to Goodwill Podcasting with Connor, Dan, and Stone, your movie podcast that today is going back to the future. We are talking about the trilogy, the iconic trilogy of the 80s. And I'm very excited because I had never watched these movies. This was Connor. Connor's been asking us to do this for a long time now, and it's finally, today is the day. We are going to travel both forward and backwards with Marty McFly, Emmett Brown, my guy Biff, who I want to talk about so much. Oh, shoot, nice shirt. If anybody's watching, that's a sick shirt, Connor. I didn't even realize you had that on. But let me ask you, why these movies, Connor? Why have you been just so adamant about us talking about them? What has made them stand the test of time with you?
So I've talked how many times about growing up, like on sick days or stuff, that I would watch Star Wars with my dad. This was like the other franchise that he would show me. And genuinely, number one is maybe like one of my top 5 favorite movies of all time. I can watch it on repeat. And then listening to my wife shit on it all week because she thinks the movies are dumb was really just pissing me off.
My wife feels the exact same way, which is interesting. I just think it's kind of like that M. Night Shyamalan thing. Like the characters speak and talk in a certain way. Like it feels like a film. Like it feels fake, but like you just like dive into this world.
Well, also time traveling in a car. So yeah.
No, that's not fake. That's real. But I get that critique. Is that what she says too? Like she doesn't get like how they speak and how they talk and stuff like that.
She just thinks the concept is dumb, dude.
It's
my wife will watch 10 minutes of a movie and be like, this is stupid, and turn it off. And it could be like Alien or something. She still says the dumbest movie I've ever watched is 2001's A Space Odyssey.
What is your number one? That's tragic. What is your number one movie that your wife watches?
Her favorite movie of all time is Emperor's New Groove.
Good. Dan, what about your girlfriend?
She doesn't watch a lot of movies.
There's got to be one. There's got to be one.
She loves Mulan.
There you go. Nice.
Yeah.
I'll say mine is The Princess Diaries for my wife. She was watching that last night.
Never seen it.
That's a solid movie, dude. That's good. That's good. And I posted it on Twitter, but it's hilarious because they try to make Anne Hathaway like ugly at the beginning, and I'm like, she still looks kind of hot. Nice try. And then they just like straighten her hair, and I was like, okay. But
yeah, I don't know. My wife's also a big advocate for Legally Blonde.
Yeah, great movies. Actually, my girlfriend likes that a lot too.
There you go. So does my wife. All the same.
Good movie, honestly.
I had an interesting prompt for y'all, especially with Dan being such a history buff. What is one moment in the past that you all would want to travel to?
Kennedy assassination.
And what is one moment in the future?
That was
Dan, why would you want to do that?
I need to know what happened.
So we can prove it was
Gotta
fake.
see Woody Harrelson's dad.
Wasn't it Magneto, I thought?
I'm sorry, what?
Woody Harrelson's dad got arrested. He's one of the 3 tramps. Woody Harrelson's dad was a hitman for the mob.
I think I knew that. I didn't know he had anything to do with Kennedy.
He most likely didn't, but he was there, and he was like with these 2 other guys on like a railway line, like moving away from the area, and he got arrested, and then nothing came from it. But
isn't there like some rumor that like possibly him and Matthew McConaughey are like related?
It's highly likely.
You talked about that. I think you made a video about that, right?
Brothers. Yes. That's very, very likely.
So cool.
I think I would maybe Civil War, or if I can go, since we
Which
don't
side?
have a date, you couldn't do it in the DeLorean, but something to do with the pyramids.
Join the Confederate Army. That's my dream.
Oh my gosh, the pyramids, that'd be sick. Yeah, to like see them get built, like see all the aliens, like
the aliens. Yeah.
I was gonna say the one that I thought of at the top of my head was I think it'd be really cool to go back in time. Maybe it's lame, I don't know, but it's about movies. So to be in line for the very first showing of Star Wars, because I know that movie kind of took everyone by surprise when it came out. So I would have just loved to be in that atmosphere, like when people stepped out and were like, holy shit kind of a thing. Like that would just be epic. And I wish midnight movies would come back, but they won't. I know people have like various opinions about that, but
I wish they would.
I don't think Dan would.
What if you had to like fully live your life during another time period? Like you were going for the duration.
Oh shit.
There's so much of like there's a lot of bad options, right? Like
Well, we are essentially. I mean, people. I saw a comedian joke about that. We are essentially living in the best time ever. I remember him talking about the fact how it's crazy that we can just go to a restaurant and order like chicken wings. Like, imagine trying to do that in, like the like medieval times. I just
yes.
want the wings of the chicken, please. That's tough. I'm not a hunter. Like, I would die though.
Stone,
Not
you
a
don't have
hunter.
to
What are
go
you
back
going
that
back to
far.
like
You could go
10,000
like the
BC? Like
60s.
what?
Well, yeah.
There's a lot of times you
People.
wouldn't have to hunt.
Yeah, you can go like 30 years back if you want.
Yeah, make America great again, man. It's the prime.
When would you want to go live, Dan? I'm saying that because I feel like you're such a guy of history, so I feel like you would want to go back to like the 1100s or something.
All that stuff is I mean, 1100s is rough. Maybe like the Renaissance, but like people were just weird. And there's like I don't know, like I don't want to worry about like the Black Death. Like I don't want to worry about like catching a fever and just dying because they bleed me. Like I don't want to worry about that stuff. But I don't know. Definitely not I hate the 80s so much. The 80s is the worst. It was just like a black hole of like music, movies, TV, politics. It's all terrible. So, not the 80s. Maybe like 1500 in like Italy. That would be cool. See Leonardo,
Solid pick. Solid pick.
not the Ninja Turtle, the Da Vinci.
Thank you. Do we get to go back with the knowledge we have now?
Yes.
Yes.
90s.
Reasons?
You just try to make some money.
Stock market. Yeah.
Oh, you're trying to pull a Biff in part two.
Yeah, I'm Biff. Basically.
Get like this. What is it? A sports almanac? Yeah, that's funny. I don't know.
I was gonna say if I had to legit pick one, I might pick like the 20s, like literally for the history of baseball.
Yeah, but then you got the Great Depression, and then you got World War II, and then you got Korea, and then you got Vietnam.
Ah.
You would get drafted though.
I'll just follow Muhammad Ali's steps.
I want to go back to 2015 and start working out my very first semester of college.
But you didn't give an actual answer, Stone.
2015.
That's your answer. Is 2015 the time you lived through? That's the dumbest thing I heard today.
Life you've had. I mean, good for you, man.
Will I ever tell you this? Like in college, I every single semester, right? And I feel like I'm obviously not the only guy who did this. They're like, this is or woman. This is the semester that I get fit, right? And you take a picture of yourself in the mirror, and you're like, I want to get a transformation. I can't remember if I told you guys this, but basically, I gained like 40 to 50 pounds in college. So there was a transformation, and it was funny because I was on a flight with my dad, and I like was swiping through my photos, and I realized I do have pictures, but of just me getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. Very hilarious. I still have those photos. So
it's like a reverse fitness journey.
Yeah, because that's when you start getting your skinny vanilla latte from Starbucks that I tried.
It's true. All right, when in the future would you want to travel to?
I mean, I think we got like 50 years left, maybe. So
Year 48.
It's not even worth it. Definitely like really, really far. I'd like maybe like 3,000 or something like that.
Okay, Jonas Brothers.
So that was good. I don't know. I was just gonna go with movies again. The end of James Cameron's Avatar movies. That'd be interesting to see what's all going down in Pandora.
When is that set?
Probably 2030.
You're gonna go ahead 5 years?
Boring answers.
That's not boring.
5 years. You're gonna go to 2015 and 2030.
I don't know what movies are coming out.
You're gonna live through the other.
I don't know what movies are coming out in 3000. But to be honest, those movies would be very interesting. So okay, 2,999.
Okay.
And then I can tell you, I can come back and I can tell you all that what's going on. I can ruin it for you.
Nice.
Trump's still here.
Yeah, Cyborg Trump has downloaded his brain into a robot.
Connor, are you gonna give a lame answer like me?
I can't give you an exact year, but I'll just say the first year that like flying cars are the standard.
Yeah, it's not when these movies thought they were gonna be. That's like the one thing that everyone wants, and it just is never gonna happen. I feel like.
Honestly, I take the hoverboard over a flying car.
Hoverboards exist.
Not like this one.
Are you
Pretty
talking
sure
about those?
they do.
Huh?
I'm pretty sure they do.
I'm pretty sure they don't.
Oh, he's typing away. The one hoverboard I think of is like those ones with the giant wheel in the middle that people could just zoom like
Yeah,
down
those are
streets
cool.
like super fast on. Those look dangerous. They have like gangs in like New York of those like they have like 30 people will just like zoom past people on those things.
Yes, they are a real thing.
How much?
So there you go. That is a lot. Wait, over under. I'm gonna guess
I
20.
don't think it actually hovers though, but it self propels.
How?
He's like he's like this is a skateboard. I told you this was a fun.
Like if you have enough money, it exists.
Anything exists if you have enough money, or you could try to build it. I told you guys this was an interesting prompt. All my answers, I guess, were very poor, but
Yeah, you went like
Terrible.
max like 10 years back.
no, I said Star Wars. I said the opening night of Star Wars. I forgot about that.
My bad. After
Anyways.
we gave you shit.
Anyways, let's travel back though. That being said, oh man, I was like so ready to like go right into when Back to the Future came out, but I didn't have it popped up in time. 1985. I mean, I'm sure everyone knows the plot of this movie. I think, like I said already, though, this was my first time watching it, which was fun, which was interesting. I kind of knew the premise of it. I think the one thing going in that everyone talks about is the incest, which, it was there. I took it and I watched it and I was like, all right. And it's interesting thoughts about that whole thing, but I don't want to give my thoughts just yet. I don't want to spoil anything. Dan, you seem like you had some interesting stuff to talk about. I mean, you already said that you hated the 80s, so does that include Back to the Future?
I don't hate the movie. No, it's just
Okay.
I think this is my least favorite movie in the trilogy for sure. I think it's the most straightforward, and I just think it gets a little bit repetitive. I think a lot of the humor here doesn't necessarily work for me. And I don't know, it's just kind of the gag of like it's like a will they won't they with his mom, which is it's obviously never going to happen. And they go back to it over and over and over. And I mean, it's kind of weird. She's kind of like predatory. Like she's taking care of him and like takes his pants off. It's like talking about his underwear. It's like, what are you doing? Like, I don't know. And his dad is also just a complete weirdo. His dad is literally like giving off like offender vibes. He's in a tree with binoculars. Like,
I
get
wasn't
that man.
expecting that.
Like, he needs to be like, have a minimum distance from schools and stuff. He's an odd guy. And I feel like everything they do, like the only things they do that like get the attention of her is like beating up Biff essentially, and they just go back and forth doing that, and she's like, "Wow, this is great." And instantly falls in love. Like, what are we talking about?
He's the hero.
It's an odd movie.
No, not the first time she falls in love with him. I think the only reason why she falls in love with him in the first place is because he's just a boy in her home, right? Because if her
That's
dad,
weird too.
yeah, she seems like she has never seen a guy in her life, and the very first one that she sees is like in her bedroom. So she's like pants off now.
Yeah, but that's not like typical behavior. I would say, but
I mean, did you? I mean, what is this? 1955? Maybe it was. Maybe that's when we should travel back to.
definitely not. No.
No, just for
That's
accuracy, to see how accurate the movie is.
Check the accuracy of some other movies too.
But I think the next two have just a lot more interesting stuff going on in terms of like the time travel itself and like kind of seeing different iterations of characters and more so seeing like the stakes of time travel. I think they're explored a little bit better. Here it's basically just, you know, will he exist? He has that picture that's like disappearing from um I don't know. It's just kind of boring to me.
Connor, how you doing, man?
Dan's entitled to his opinion. We disagree pretty frequently, and it doesn't get heated unless it's about Lamar Jackson, apparently.
I mean, usually it's me and you guys who disagree with me. I thought this movie was great. I think all of these movies are really solid. The one moment that I thought about you, Dan, I was like, I wonder how, what he's gonna think about that. It's the part where can't remember what nationality there were, but the guys who were trying to like kill
It's like Libyan nationalists. Like what? Picked a random country.
I was like, what do we do? Where did this come from? I was not expecting Libyan nationalists. I could tell you that when I watched this for the first time. But yeah, I just think the script, not as much happens. It feels like not as much happens, even though a lot does. I mean, this runtime is like, I think like an hour and 19 minutes, something like that. So, or not 19 minutes, but like 119 minutes.
It's 116.
No, that's close.
They're all 2 hours. They're all 2 hours, basically.
Yeah, so it seems like not a lot happens, but I mean, they're all the same runtime. I just think the script is super tight, and I feel like that's why a lot of people like it. It gives you just enough of plot, in the current 1985, and then going back. I don't know why I didn't know when the first Back to the Future came out, because literally 1985 is such a big thing in these movies. That was kind of embarrassing, but I don't want to talk about that. But yeah, I think I really enjoyed it. But the more I think about it, the more I might agree with Dan. I don't know. As the movies went on, it just got more fun. I hate to admit it. Like, what is going on in the third movie is a lot more engaging than him possibly falling in love with his mom. I hate to say. It really, and there's no denying that. So maybe people just love this movie for nostalgia reasons. Like, why do you love this movie above? Is this your favorite in the trilogy? I'm assuming, right, Connor?
It is.
Why?
I have one big issue with 3. If it wasn't for that, it might sit higher than this one.
Okay.
But I think this movie is just great. I think Michael J. Fox and Christopher Lloyd's on-screen chemistry is like some of the best, like almost buddy cop, even though it's not a buddy cop movie, like pretty much buddy cop movie we've seen.
Why are they friends?
That's what I was about to say. I respect that kind of about this movie.
Too.
What, Connor?
They don't really give a backstory. I've thought about that too. Like, we're just kind of thrown into this world where he's like shadowing this scientist, which I'll give you that. A little strange.
Disgraced scientist. My dad.
Yeah, well,
I kind of respected the movie for not explaining that, to be honest. Like, that's something, like, going into it, like, for the first time, I was, especially in 2025 movies, you explain this backstory between this relationship. I guess it is a little bit strange because it's an adult and a kid, but the runtime maybe would have been longer in that case. So it's like, it's just, I assumed that he was just a teacher from school who he really liked and connected with. And then
I don't think he was a teacher.
So that's a little bit weird though, if he's not a teacher.
I don't think he was. I think
I'm
he
trying
was
to find
a scientist that anyway. I think Michael J. Fox is like the perfect casting for this because I think he's like very like relatable, like to how all of us would have been in 18, and like we go back in time. I don't know if you knew this, Stone, but Bob Gale, one of the producers, came up with the entire idea for this movie when he went home. I think it was for Thanksgiving, and saw his dad in a high school yearbook, and he was like the class president, and he was like, "Man, would I have liked my dad, or would he have been all like rah rah school spirit? Because I hated my class president for that." And then he was like, thought about it more. He's like, what if my mom was like the high school slut? Like, so that's kind of where that storyline came in. And he was like, I don't know if I'd want to go back and see them like that. Strange,
but yeah.
I also just think with this movie, like Lorraine and Jennifer are just like like terrible characters, like terribly written characters, completely one dimensional. And I just think like all Lorraine does is just be infatuated with someone, and that's it. There's nothing else going on. And like I think the opportunity of like getting to meet your parents like that when they were young, it's like such an interesting concept, and there's so many things you can do with that, right? And so many interesting conversations you could have, or just like things that could be pulled out of that. And you just see his dad's a loser who punches a guy and becomes a man, and his mom just is a literal robot, and that's it. And it's just like that's so boring. Like it's this is not interesting to me, and that it's so repetitive. They're both of their characters have no growth, like no arc, except for George just punching Biff, and that's it. And he's confident now.
I mean,
I
we
just
pretty much
like
go 3 movies with Marty having no growth at all.
I don't agree with that at all.
Yeah, the third movie definitely shows Marty having growth. I
That's
will
what I'm
say.
saying. The third movie. Okay, fine. We go 2 movies without really having any growth.
Something that
I
I
wouldn't
was
agree. No, no, no. I completely disagree with that too, because the second movie is literally built off of Marty's mistake. Like the second movie is about Marty's the consequences of Marty's greed coming back to bite everyone and completely changing the second movie is very much like It's a Wonderful Life. I mean, like when you think about it. And they were another thing that I wanted to mention was they were looking at a lot of Frank Capra's stuff when they were looking at creating the world in the 50s.
mm,
But I think his influence is really, really heavy in the second movie, especially. But um, when the two of them were writing this, they didn't really like identify with either period of time. They felt like they were very, very different culturally, and that there was some like good humor to be found in like contrasting the 50s and the 80s. So that's kind of what they build it off of. But I don't think I think there's growth from Marty in each movie.
yeah, he's trying not to. I mean, he has a girl falling all over him in this one, so he has growth and says, "Nah, I'm okay, mom," and that's something.
It's quite a struggle for him.
But something that I noticed, especially towards the end movies, was that Michael J. Fox. I think he is. So he's supposed to be playing. How old is he in this? 15?
I think he's supposed to be
Like,
like 16, 17.
I don't know because I think he was 24 when he made this movie.
He
And
was.
what really helps him out a lot is he's 5'4". He's really short, which kind of when I haven't told you guys this, but I was going to try to watch the documentary, as you know, and I didn't get the time to do that. But instead, I watched the Michael J. Fox documentary on Apple TV Plus, which was really interesting. It really didn't show you anything about him that you didn't necessarily know. But one thing, I'm about to contradict that. One thing is that he got a lot of roles because basically he could play children. Like he was 16 years old, and they would be casting calls for like, hey, we need a really intellectual 12-year-old, and he would just go try out for it because he looked like he was 12 years old. So I get why they cast him in this. Like it's just because he's so short. But I will say, like towards the end movies, I think he's 29. I was able to tell in the face a little bit. I was like, this guy is no longer 15. And it's funny that they like are trying to, pass it off at him, which I will say, now that I'm just racking this around in my brain, were the part 2 and part 3 filmed at the same time?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's why
Which
there's
is
like literally a trailer for the third movie at the end of the second one.
which was sick. I was like, and one thing I also love that it said to be concluded rather than to be continued. And they were like, dude,
I'm
this
happy you
next
brought that
one,
up.
the next one is the last one. Well, we should be talking about the first movie.
Um,
But he
he
was
was
supposed to be
17.
17, by the way, just to
Yeah.
clarify.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, that's what you were gonna say as well, Connor.
Yeah.
Oh, gotcha. To be fair, he's pretty short for 17. 5'4" is pretty short for 17. But I mean, I'm not gonna like hound on Michael J. Fox's shortness. I will stop talking about it. This will be the last time.
I think it's funny because there's so many shots like trying to make Biff look so big and just like, wow, look at this big guy. It's like, no, Michael J. Fox is just tiny. Like,
Yeah. Well,
that's-
and like Doc's character like walks around kind of with that like hunch, and it was literally so like they could kind of fit on screen together. Like it just became part of Doc's character.
yeah. Um, I was thinking as I was kind of watching these about Zemeckis's career. It's a very interesting career, like very, very interesting. And he's been all over the place. And I was curious, like, I mean, how do you guys feel about his stuff in general?
50-50.
I mean, yeah, that's a good way to put it. I'm trying to pop up this stuff
I
real
was gonna
quick.
say so like I like all three Back to the Futures. I'm all right on Forrest Gump. I like the Polar Express. Castaway is good. Um,
Dan, you recently watched Death
terrible.
Becomes Her, right? Oh, I thought
No.
you did. My bad. Keep going, Connor. Sorry,
His Pinocchio was terrible.
I didn't watch that.
I liked that version of the Christmas Carol, but it's also been, 10 years since I've seen it. So who knows if I actually did like it.
It's interesting, an interesting career. Like he has like Who Framed Roger Rabbit, which I haven't watched in a long time, but is awesome. He did that Beowulf movie from 2007. And then he did that Pinocchio movie, which everyone said was horrible. Correct?
Horrible. Yeah,
Yeah.
I watched it.
But he's made so much stuff and kind of been all over the place, and I think it's definitely an important filmmaker, especially as like an American filmmaker. I mean, I think he's one of the more prominent Americans directors.
I mean,
Yeah.
I respect him because he just does bold movies and that don't necessarily always work. I mean, there was the time where he was into stop motion, like he did Welcome to Marwin, starring Stephen Carell, like you said, Beowulf, obviously Christmas Carol, Polar Express. I mean, those are all similar style films. So, and they don't necessarily always work, but there's something different, which I admire him for that. But even here, it's such a crazy idea for a film, and I know you like that, Dan, and I actually kind of enjoyed it as well. It was not terrible. It was fine. It was kind of emotional at the end. I was tearing up a little bit watching old Tom Hanks walk around on screen. So I don't know. The guy's it's a very interesting career.
I did not realize Kathleen Kennedy was an executive producer for Back to the Future.
Yep.
I'm glad you mentioned executive producers though, because just talking about people involved with this, I mean, this movie wouldn't like happen if it wasn't for Steven Spielberg, which is just insane because I feel like every other episode we talk about a movie that wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for Steven Spielberg. Like they literally presented him this idea. I believe the writers were friends with him. They worked with him. They wrote his movie 1941. And because of that, they had a good relationship with him, and no one would take this movie. Basically, they pitched the idea to Disney, and Disney's like, dude kind of falls in love with his mom, so we're good. They didn't like that idea.
Yeah.
But they basically, I think Robert Zemeckis just wanted a good script. He didn't care about what was necessarily in it. He wanted a good idea because he was coming off of success. I can't remember what he was coming off of. Maybe it was. I can't remember.
It was one he did with Danny DeVito.
Romancing the Stone.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah, he's coming off of Romancing the Stone. So he grabbed onto it, and then basically they went to Steven Spielberg, and he made things happen. Which, good for Steve. Good for Steve, man.
Yeah, and I'm happy they kept the name Back to the Future, though, because all the other names they threw around for this were terrible.
Name them. I need them. Do you have them?
One was like Doc Brown's Time Travel Adventures, something like that. One was going to be like Alien Man from Pluto. Hold on. I'll get them up so I can get you the actual ones.
Say, and then you probably know this, Connor, from your Spaceman from Pluto. I'm looking it up.
Yeah, thank you.
But you probably know that Michael J. Fox originally wasn't the one that was cast in this, right?
Yeah, it was Lan or what's his name? I'm blanking on it, but yeah, pretty much. Do you know why he was taken off the set, Stone?
It just wasn't working. That original actor, I'll pop it up here in a second.
Yeah, it
But
was
the
Eric
original,
Stoltz. It was like stuff like apparently like one he was trying to method act for this and like trying to make Marty a much more like dramatic character than kind of like goofy comedic teenager. Um, and then also he was apparently like aggressively hitting on the girl who played Jennifer, like behind the seat or behind the set. So they kicked him off. I don't. He's probably his most famous role that I know of is he's the drug dealer in Pulp Fiction.
interesting. Well, the thing is that they wanted Michael J. Fox from the beginning. They
Yeah.
wanted him like to be Marty, and he was affiliated already with Family Ties. And I believe they went to the showrunner of Family Ties. It was at the beginning of the season, and they said, "Hey, we want Marty for this project," and he's like, "Nope, sorry about it." And they shot 5 weeks of Back to the Future, and then that one actor wasn't working out, so they went back and they're like, "Please, please let us have Michael J. Fox." And I think he saw that the name Steve. They showed him the script. He's like, "Read the script, see if you want to do it. But if you want to do it, you still have to put Family Ties first." And he just looked. I believe he just looked at the name Steven Spielberg, and he's like, "Yeah, I'll do it. Like, I don't care what it is," kind of a thing. But it's insane because he was filming both projects at the exact same time. He would work from 10 to 5 on Family Ties, and then he would like drive over to the set of Back to the Future and work like a night shift, like from 5 p.m. to 5 a.m. And then he would get in a car and sleep for like 3 hours and then do it all over again. And he did, I believe he did that for like 3 months, which is
That's so bad
wild.
for you. Holy God.
But yeah, I'm glad he did though, because this movie, and I remember in his documentary saying that he was just so exhausted that he thought his agent called him and he's like, "Hey man, we saw your movie," and he's like, "I bet it was shit, wasn't it?" He's like, "No, no, no, it was really good. I mean, people like it."
Other people they thought about were John Cusack, Johnny Depp, Ralph Macchio, Charlie Sheen, Ben Stiller, Robert Downey Jr., Matthew Modine, Corey Hart. So a lot of people were kind of in the running. And then with Doc Brown, Jeff Goldblum, John Lithgow, excuse me, Robin Williams, John Cleese, Mandy Patinkin, Gene Hackman, James Woods.
Jeez.
I think
It's
the only one you've said that's like kind of intrigued me would have been Robin Williams.
he definitely could have done it.
Well, yeah, yeah.
He
Which
could
is
have.
funny because Christopher Lloyd was about to like kind of back out of Hollywood because he was like he said he wasn't like really getting a lot of success and he wasn't like happy with much of his projects and he was going to go back to like I think theater and said like just get back to his roots to try and like reharness all of his skills and then I think it was Spielberg that convinced him as well.
Spielberg's got a lot of power in Hollywood. Still does.
I mean,
The dude.
maybe the most powerful guy in Hollywood, like ever.
I don't know anymore. Maybe
Over
still. I
like
don't
such a
know.
long period of time, like his name attached to it, just like will convince probably anyone to come back.
Yeah. I think this. I mean, we touched on it earlier. I think it's definitely like a big nostalgia movie for a lot of people, which I understand. Kind of, it's an important part of how you look at something. Um, I don't know. I think in my head, I had always thought that I didn't like. I always thought one of the sequels was really poor, and I don't remember why I thought that. But rewatching it, I didn't feel that way. I also wanted to call out this was a huge, like financially a huge success. They made this for $20 million and made almost 400. Like that's
Dude, this was top of the box office for 3 months straight.
yeah.
I'm
And
glad
like
you said that.
some big movies came out in 85.
I'll say I'm glad you said that, Dan, because actually there was one moment. I'm trying to find the movie right here that Michael J. Fox actually starred in like the top two grossing movies of the year. Because he was also, I believe he was in a movie called Wolfman. I believe that is the, or not Wolfman. It's like Teen Wolf, something like that. And that like opened at number 2 because of Back to the Future. I'm trying to find out what it was called though. I believe it was called Teen Wolf. Maybe that's what the inspiration of the show was off of. It's like some B movie that he had really
Yeah,
liked
it was
being
Teen
involved.
Wolf.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so that came out the exact same year. Yep. And I remember he said that he was on set and literally down the street they were filming Back to the Future, like before he was even a part of the project. He was like, "What's that?" And they're like, they basically said it's a Spielberg project. He's like, "Oh, cool." And then he got to be a part of it, which good for him. But I don't know. I mean, when I watched these this week, I had a big gap in between watching the first one and watching the second and third one. I don't know. Maybe it's the Dan getting in my head, but there is a lot more stuff going on in the second and third one, which is just kind of a wild ride. Maybe it does get convoluted at times, but
I will say in these movies, like there's not the most thought put into the time travel. Like they always talk about, oh, it's gonna impact this and that. They do all kinds of stuff that should have like huge ramifications. It's just like the world's still fine. There's like multiple versions of these people running around. It's just, and again, I don't need this to be like airtight. I don't really care about that. But it does get a bit messy, I think.
I don't know. I think this is like one of the best trilogies of all time. Like any one of these movies you can pick up, whoever you are, whatever your favorite genre is, there's comedy, there's romance, there's action. You know, I think it does really well for that.
Incest.
Easy.
for the freaks out there,
100% right. But
you know what I looked up, which is very surprising, and I might make a video about this. I don't know. Is that I'm so curious why this didn't have like a be rebooted or like a fourth movie because it just seems like so
In that
popular.
trailer on Facebook with Tom Holland.
dude, I've
But
seen one with Michael J. Fox and Christopher Lloyd that's like AI. It's horrible.
but I mean, this makes me respect Zemeckis even more because basically it's just like Zemeckis is like, no, do not make another one, and then also Bob Gale, the writer's like, no, do
Yeah,
not touch our, do not touch it.
they both said that it won't happen until they're dead. And then, they can't really say no anymore. But like, dude, I just can't imagine how many times they're getting a call from like Universal, like, yo, Doc Brown Origins. Like,
Well, it says here that and I'm wondering what you guys' take on this is or thoughts on it. They said they would only consider revisiting the franchise with a musical, which is interesting because I believe maybe not too long ago, there is a Back to the Future musical on Broadway.
Yeah, Gale put it together. I think he created that.
Okay. So maybe adapting that for the big screen would be interesting.
I just don't want them to touch this anymore. I'm content with the trilogy. Not everything
Okay.
needs more. I mean, look at how the new Indiana Jones are being reviewed.
Yeah, the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull is way better than Dial of Destiny. I'll tell you that.
I haven't seen Dial of Destiny still, but like,
The ending is wild. I love how bonkers the ending is. But everything before that's kind of like meh.
but that's what I'm saying. Like, these are like kind of like 80s classics. And then, like, one hasn't been touched, still very highly regarded. One is Indiana Jones that people are kind of shitting on now. Like, people put the stipulation, like, oh, those first three are good, but I just don't want them to touch it.
Well, I wanted to go watch the musical when I lived next to New York, and my wife had watched Back to the Future, and she, like I said, she didn't like it. So I was like, "Hey, what about this?" She's like, "No," and I was like, "Nice, cool. They want to go anyways." All right.
It's funny that you wanted to go when you haven't seen these.
I just like musicals, and I was like, "Back to the Future, cool."
I think there was something too, kind of speaking on the first one still and kind of the start of Back to the Future. I think originally they were talking about a Ford Mustang for the car. The first idea was like a refrigerator.
Yeah, wouldn't have
Yeah.
hit the same. Would have had trouble pushing that with a train, I believe. But
You're getting ahead of ourselves.
yeah, I thinking about those movies, man. Dan, what did you rate this?
3 stars.
Connor's 5.
Yeah. Like, it's one of my favorite movies of all time.
I think let me go back to my review. I think I'm gonna bring it down to a 4. I'm telling you what, the second and third, I keep saying it, they're way more fun. I mean,
For
I
the longest time, like, because I hadn't watched these in maybe like a good like 8 years up until 2 years ago, maybe. Because I watched them so much in my childhood that for the longest time I was like, oh, number two is my favorite. And a lot of people were like, how can that be your favorite? Like, one's so good. And then I rewatched it. And I was like, all right, yeah, one kind of bangs.
I mean, Dan, you are the bet that Connor placed. You're halfway there, I will say. So
Okay.
you guys want to get into part two?
Yeah.
So let me remember. So the first movie ends with Doc coming back and being like and Marty's with Jennifer and Doc's like, "Holy shit, your kids are all messed up. Come on, let's go." It's like, "Sure." And then the car flies away. The reason why this might be my favorite because the character of Biff is so much more emphasized in this film. And I think it's an absolute crime that Thomas F. Wilson does. He's not on any of the posters. It really pisses me off. I think he's awesome in these movies. He
Yeah.
provides so much life to these films, and
He does so
he's
much for them. Like,
yeah, he's playing like so many different characters. And sure, the other characters sometimes are doing that well. Like, I mean, Michael J. Fox, and then the third one's like, "Oh, what do you know? They got the guns or whatever." He's like his Irish accent he's trying to do. It doesn't compare. Like Wilson has so much. Is so. I mean, look at him on screen. He's just such a presence, and I love that he's. I mean, he's my favorite part of these movies. I wrote that in my review of the trilogy, and I love that he is like this is the most he's in any of the films, and that's why I love it the most.
yeah, I like this a lot. I kind of briefly touched on it before, but I think like this movie is interesting because like again, Marty does and Marty's greed like kind of kicks all of this off and creates this alternate reality that has a lot of ramifications. And I think like again, this to me is very It's a Wonderful Life, kind of like, Pottersville. And when you look at like kind of how those two things are portrayed, it's very similar. Um, he's brought in like these huge like casinos, and there's a lot of like gambling and just kind of everything is corrupt. He controls the police. It's very like Orwellian in regards to like how the future is portrayed. And I just like that. I think it's fun, and I think actually their representation of the future is pretty cool. And I think this is definitely like the darkest of the
Yeah.
movies, and the least silly. Um,
Uh, maybe.
I'd say it's the least silly. I mean, it's the heaviest. You have Biff literally like murdering his dad, and then
Yeah,
like
that's fair.
trying to murder him.
I'm just thinking of the hanging scene in number three. But yeah, you're probably right. I would agree.
Yeah. I just think this is really really good, and it kind of is like teaching Marty something about time travel and like the purpose of it and what it's for and like the consequences. I like that.
One thing, they did almost predict it right for the year that the Cubs won the World Series finally.
Yeah,
Um,
against the Miami.
yeah. Stone and Dan probably, but I feel like Dan knows this. Trivia. Do you know what modern day actor was playing the arcade game in the diner?
He kind of looked familiar, to be honest. No.
Elijah Wood.
How old was he in this? He must have been like 10 years old.
I mean, probably he was probably like 8.
That's cool. That's cool.
But yeah, it's just a fun little trivia fact. Now, I have a lot of fun with number two, but it's so funny, like rewatching this now when they go to that alternate 1985 and Biff is, obviously rich. He kind of reminds us of a certain modern day billionaire
Yeah,
that has his own
very
tower with
Trump,
his own name
very
on
Trump. Yes, I thought that even with the hair and shit, I was like, wow.
it. Dude, I was cracking up at that.
I'll say one
Yeah.
thing. I'll say one thing I really like too is the fact that, especially after the ending of the first film, this movie's kind of I don't know if the right word is a plot twist, but it subverts your expectations. That's a better phrase, because you think I would going into this for part two that this whole thing would be about them saving their kids, but it's not. Like the first 10 to 15 minutes is, and then like you said, Dan, because of what Marty does while he's in the future, it like jumpstarts the rest hour and 30 minutes of the movie, which I think would have been super cool to go back and be like, I don't know, like being a person in the audience, I guess I just watched it, which I can relate, these feelings. I didn't know where this movie was going to go. And I was like, this is sick. Because you go, I mean, there are significant portions both in the future, the present, and the past, which I think this is the only movie that does that. So that's really fun. And I just have to talk about it because it's been burned into my mind. But there's one shot that's probably my favorite shot in any of the films, which the third movie has great cinematography. But there's a scene where Marty is looking in on his parents, and he's looking through this little window, and you're focused in on this window, and it's the exchange between at the dance when him and his parents are meeting up and they get together, and he's outside the school looking into that, right? And you're focused on his parents, like you're watching what Marty's watching, and all of a sudden Biff's face comes into frame, and it's so sudden, and he is like sweaty and dirty and like pissed the fuck off, and it's such a crazy shift, and you're just like, wow. And it's beautiful because it's Marty's face on one side, Biff's face on one side, and you still have that window in the background. I just thought it was really special. Like I said, Wilson is just ridiculous in these movies, and he plays such a different character in the third one too. It's so good.
Yeah. That's one of my favorite things too about this movie is they didn't cast older people. They literally just took their entire younger cast, whether it's Marty's parents or Biff, and like just put on old makeup and had them run through all three of these movies. I really like that aspect.
Well, it was a problem because there was actually a lawsuit because they recast Jennifer, and they also recast Marty's dad.
I
Really?
knew it. I knew they recast Marty's dad.
And what they tried to do was basically make this other actor look like Crispin Glover with like prosthetics and stuff. And there's the reason that SAG, like, they wrote a bunch of stuff about that you can't do that anymore because of this movie. Because basically they tried to like recreate his likeness or use his likeness without using him.
Mm.
And I think he said that they said that he wanted more money for the movie, but he also said um, he said his primary reason for not doing part two was a philosophical disagreement on the film's message. He said the story rewarded the characters with financial gain, such as Marty's truck, rather than love. I thought something that was interesting that I wanted to talk about, and this it touches on the end of the first movie, but it's interesting how different his parents were, right? Because of his actions. And the differences are like his mom is skinny and his dad is successful and like a douchebag. Like, to be blunt, like he doesn't seem like a nice person, but he's not a loser. And I found that also just kind of strange because it's just like, are those the two options?
And let me get this straight. Is the only thing that changed, right, to alter the future, right? Because essentially he fucks it up because his mom falls in love with him instead of the dad. The entire movie is him trying to convince the mom to fall in love with the dad and not him.
Because
The
George was
only
supposed to be hit by the truck.
Right. The only thing that happens, right, is his dad punches Biff. And
Yeah.
that completely changes both of the characters
He's
in
a
the future.
confident man.
She's just in love
And
with
she's
the hero
skinny.
complex.
And she's skinny because of that, yeah. It's so dumb, man. I'm sorry. It's so dumb.
Yeah, but like that's so weird too in this one when he wakes up in Biff Tower and he's like looking at his mom, he's like at her chest, he's like, Mom, you're
Yeah,
so
no.
big.
That moment is like what I feel like watching the entire first movie, and I'm just like, thank God this is not the focus, because it's like it's just like that's not funny. It's not even like a big deal. Like, it's weird. It's just like, who would act like that? Like, I don't know.
I think what I like the most about number two, though, compared to the other two, is this one's pacing is the best, I think, across the board. Like, there is so much that happens to tail off of what Stone was saying about they go to the past, present, and future in this one. Like, there is not a slow moment in this to me. I think the slowest moment in the entire film is when he's like trying to get into, I think it's Strickland's office to get the almanac. Like that's the slow part, and that's like 5 minutes of the movie.
That's funny though, because I thought that I was gonna see a plot hole because I can't remember why, but I was like, "There's no way that's the magazine or something like that," and then it wasn't, uh, or the almanac, the sports almanac, and then it wasn't. I was like, "Shit!" I thought I had a plot hole in the movie, but nope, they got me.
Yeah, but like I mean, we jump so quickly from we're in the future, we're there for like 15 minutes, no, maybe longer, maybe like 20, 25. He fucks it up. They have to go back. Then we're there, and then we go back, and then we're back to 1955, and it gets fucked up, and now we're starting number 3. Like this moves so quickly. This I think is the shortest 2 hours feels out of all of these.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's really well paced. This is technically the shortest too. It's 108 minutes, but
That might help.
I think this is the most interesting. I'm still kind of I literally just watched the third one last night. I'm still kind of chewing on it. I did really like this. Like this is an easy like 4.5 for me. Um, I like the futuristic aspect of it. I think, and it does more. And I think what you see with the way this movie uses the first movie is like an ideal usage. Like it's paying homage, and it's like literally using footage from the first movie. And like I think a lot of times these days there's kind of a lot of questions around how to use nostalgia and use like stuff you've already seen. This perfectly writes it into the story, and it makes it so that it's like a necessity for the story to progress. But it's still fun to see, right? And it brings you back to that. And again, we talked about how people have so much nostalgia for the first movie, but this is like the perfect balance of that, I think, where it's like a necessity and it's also fun to see.
Yeah. I think I've complained on this podcast a few times too about product placement in movies feeling forced. I think this movie does it overall pretty good.
Well,
Um,
I'll
and
say
it just
there's
feels like
go
real
ahead.
life too. Like when they're walking down the street, for the most part, like obviously they do like the big close up of the Texaco sign, but like that's just Marty taking in the future. Pepsi's his drink of choice, but like again, they're at a diner like in the 50s, and then just like throughout time, they think the diner is going to stick around. That's like, so that doesn't bother me that much, which is strange for me to think about. And then obviously the close up on the Black and Decker hydrator for the pizza.
It very much stood out to me. I
Yeah,
saw when I saw that, I was like, "Oh shoot, okay, that first movie was very successful." And they're like, "Hey, let's put all this stuff into the second one, why don't we?" And then also, I remember the fact that they like actually created those sneakers that you could step into and they would
that's
lace
so
for you,
cool.
which is sick. I'm not gonna lie, but yeah, I definitely noticed all the product placement. And I was like, that was not in the first movie, which good on them. They made a good movie that was successful.
It was a
So
little bit, yeah, not to this extent.
no, I mean I can't even remember. Wasn't there a Pepsi maybe in the first one? I think.
Yeah, there was.
Okay.
Like the biggest
Uh,
ones in the first one is like Pepsi and DeLorean, obviously.
And they had their huge homage to Steven Spielberg with like the Jaws thing. Like here's Jaws 19.
Yeah,
I thought
that's a
that was
great
cool.
thing about the future is we don't have 19 Jaws movies.
Yeah, I think something that was I thought was interesting was it seems like the defining characteristic they chose to harp on in regards to the future was kind of like AI and robots kind of having the predominant role in society in terms of like driving everything. Even at the diner, like there's like a robot or not a robot, but like a computer playing a recording of a person, like telling them the specials. And it felt very like disconnected and like everyone was kind of in their own world. I thought that was interesting how they chose to um, kind of portray that.
I wish we would have more time there, but I mean that's they couldn't have done that. I mean, there's so much to put in this movie, so it's interesting. Like it's called Back to the Future, which is funny because the future is just the present, which is the funny part about the titles of these films, right? But the actual first time that we actually get in the future, we're only there for probably what 15 minutes maybe. Which makes sense because it's harder to build a future than it is to build a past because you don't necessarily know what it's going to be like. So 55, you can replicate that. 1885, you can replicate that. Like we know, how it looks. It's a lot easier to get a horse than a hoverboard in a movie. I will.
Yeah.
I would say I wanted to say we talked about Marty's character development. More so in this movie than the first one. Doc becomes more of a prominent figure in this story. I feel like he's more of an afterthought in the first film. But basically, I want to ask, what do you think about Doc's development, and is there necessarily any there? There's 100% some there when we get to the third movie, and I absolutely love that. But I don't know. He's like I said, he's more in this movie than the first movie, and I just don't. I miss that they didn't do more with this character. He kind of is just like along for the ride with Marty, in my opinion.
What do you think, Connor?
I like him for the most part. I mean, I think Christopher Lloyd does so well playing this role. I enjoy more screen time with him. I think it shows. I think we see him getting more and more annoyed with Marty in this one, and we also see a little bit more of his preparation. Like, he's fixed the time machine to make it better. He has a briefcase full of money for all the different eras that they can go to, so they're never going to be trapped. Stuff like that. I enjoyed a lot. The only thing I don't understand with his character, which just seems like it's for the plot, is when he just doesn't park the DeLorean at the very end on the ground, and he's just like flying around in a thunderstorm. That's the only thing that I'm like, why aren't we just putting this on the ground?
Gotta have a third movie.
Correct. That's what I'm saying. It feels like it's just for that.
Yeah, it works.
I think the development you get from Doc in this is really kind of his development with Marty. Like you see them spending so much more time together, and I think you get a little bit deeper into their actual relationship, and it's more of like kind of like a father-son or like grandfather-grandson dynamic. And I think while Marty comes to understand like the consequences of time travel and the consequences of like the power they have, I think Doc is also seeing that. And I think he goes from someone who is very kind of gung ho about it and just like kind of like he talks about the consequences, but he also just will do whatever. And I think he also is kind of on that same journey of understanding like it's not something they can just like play with. It's like a toy, right? So I think you kind of see him learning the same things that Marty is learning as well.
When you mentioned the fact that Doc's kind of becoming like a father figure, or he's somewhat of a father figure to Marty, it just made me think about the fact that maybe that's how the relationship started in the first place. Like his dad was such a dweeb, and he's like, I cannot hang out with this guy. Like, there's this cool scientist that I met, I don't know, at the library, who's making a time machine. Oh, he didn't know he's making a time machine, but it is kind of weird that they hang out.
You could say like he's making like the world's biggest amplifier, and I love playing guitar.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, that's a good way of saying it. Looking at it at the very beginning for sure. But yeah, that is interesting, especially the fact that Marty's dad like disappears in these movies, which is he's not the importance of them, especially because they changed the actor. There's like, let's just get rid of him altogether.
Yeah,
and I didn't know they replaced Jennifer's actress either.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that.
There's something else I wanted to say. I'm blanking on it now. But I just think I don't know. I think this movie has the best balance tone wise and just feels the best to me in that way. This is what I was gonna say. I think one of the best things about the first movie, because you just mentioned the amplifier, Connor. I like that it starts off with the showing him like playing the guitar and like blowing out the speakers behind him, and then I like that it finishes with him getting a chance to actually play, and that's a moment that like didn't have to happen. He just was like, yeah, this is cool, like I'm just gonna do this for fun, like because the plot's already kind of wrapped up at that point. So I did like that. I think that's one of my favorite things about the first movie.
Yeah, the Johnny Be Good scene I fucking love, so I'm happy you brought that back.
Yeah, and then Chuck Berry gets the inspiration rock and roll.
I say one thing I will say, especially for the time that these were made, whenever they have, there's only one moment in like the third one where it stood out to me, but the moments where they have like two Martys or two Michael J. Foxes in the scene, it looks pretty solid. It
Yeah.
looks really good. Like I was talking about that scene I really like. I think in the window he can see himself as
Yes.
well at a certain time, and he like walks away. So you're in that window, you're playing footage from the first movie, but then you have clips from the second movie that are looking in on that screen. Kind of, it's basically just a screen that they like green screen a clip from the first movie, and I don't know, it's really impressive. There's only like one moment in the third film where like the lighting looked off between the two. um but I have to say, because you talked about that one guitar scene at the very end, they incorporate the fact that future Marty is watching, and they just do a really good job. That's all I got to say. I don't know how they did it. I bet it was a big old headache, but they did it. And the fact that I only noticed like a flaw once in these movies is pretty impressive.
Yeah. Yeah. Zemeckis, I mean, as we talked about, he's always trying to do something interesting, right? Which like you respect, and you might not always like it, but yeah.
I was gonna say, he's always been really good at kind of what's the right word? Like kind of digitally altering something. Like my dad talks about how good these movies looked when they first came out and like how the DeLorean flies into the camera basically to end the first one, like stuff like that. Like how obviously it hasn't aged that well, but I mean, even if you look at Forrest Gump, like I've heard at the time, like all the stuff they've edited Tom Hanks into, like meeting the president and stuff like that, looked very good. It's aged itself a little bit, but like he's always kind of pushing that boundary of like, I don't want to call it CGI, but like it might have been CGI by the time Forrest Gump rolled around. But this one is obviously more like kind of altering footage or just special effects.
Yeah, he's always at the forefront of like whatever technology
Yeah,
is
thank
predominant.
you.
I mean, it's not a surprise that you find out that I don't know if you want to talk about this now, Dan, or you wanted to talk about it with Jeremiah. So who was going to be on guest on the podcast, but like he used AI in I think here. I don't know how he used AI. It was probably just for something with Tom Hanks' face, which it's a little bit different AI. It's using it more as a tool
Oh, the
rather
movie
than
here.
generative AI. Yeah, my
Yeah,
bad.
like
Here,
I thought
the
you
movie
meant like
here.
in here, like Back to the Future. I was like,
No,
I'm so
sorry.
confused.
I think it was with de-aging,
Yeah, yeah.
which
So
and again, I think it's like a case by case thing. I wanted to talk about it a little bit. I think it's funny we were just talking about Back to the Future Part Two, and I think that's like one of the defining characteristics of the future there, which was interesting. Um, but yeah, in terms of everything with the Brutalist, and this is kind of a little bit of news that's been happening, I just feel a little weird about it. I think like I'm seeing people making paid advertisements for the Brutalist that were losing their minds, right? About Late Night with the Devil, which was a movie they made for $2 million, and it's an independent Australian horror movie. And people were saying to boycott. I know you, Stone, you said to boycott Late Night with the Devil.
I believe so. Yep.
Um, and I don't think that's fair. Because the narrative around Late Night with the Devil was generative AI usage is stealing, right? It's stealing from artists. And it also was no matter how small that usage is, it's a problem. And now we're seeing a movie that's very much all we've been hearing from the director, Brady, right, is about, art and the artists and how, bragging about how they made it for such little amount of money and this and that and lecturing people about so many things, and just the way he comes across, I think it matters, right? And it matters that this movie is a prestige, like art house movie that's going to be considered for Best Picture. And again, the narrative was we don't make any exceptions, right? Because this opens like a Pandora's box. If you have that in a Best Picture winner, and again, the David Yansko, the editor, said they used generative AI to create the designs that were then just sketched. So it doesn't matter if generative AI is stealing, right? It doesn't matter that they're not in the final cut of the film, which for Late Night with the Devil was what 30 seconds of screen time. But again, that was a problem then. So I can't see it not being a problem here, especially again because of the context. And the argument was, and I think Stone, you talked about like you would expect a big studio like Disney or something to do that. But when it's a smaller movie on a smaller budget, they should care more about the craft. Brady Corbet, by all accounts, is the care about the craft guy, right? Like he is the person who you would think would be holding everything else to a higher standard. And I feel like Brady, when he saw the Late Night with the Devil stuff, probably would have maybe said something about that. So I feel like there's so much hypocrisy going on, and it's frustrating me because like I don't think and I don't think it's a small thing. Um, and with the voice stuff and then the voice stuff with Amelia Perez as well in a musical, if you have an actor who cannot hit notes and you are artificially expanding their range to hit those notes, that's not them singing. And it's a musical. Like the core of Amelia Perez is the music. I think that's a big deal. Um, and I think, the voice stuff, when the David Yansko again said, when you hear Adrian Brody talking, you are hearing me. He said, you are hearing my voice in everything he is saying. So I feel like, again, Brady is trying to damage control this and reframe the conversation in a way. And I think, to me, it was dishonest because he said, oh, well, there's no generative AI in the final product. If you just had someone sketch generative AI produced designs, what's the difference? That's not created by a person. It's not created from the mind of a person. So the dishonesty around it makes me like the movie even less because the guys from Late Night with the Devil came out and said, "Yeah, we did this. We wanted to try something." Um, and I don't love that, but I just think if to call for a boycott of Late Night with the Devil and then not acknowledge anything about this is just not right to me. So I guess, Stone, what are your thoughts? Like, how do you think about it? Like, I just think it's worth conversation. And, like, again, all I'm looking for is consistency. I
Yep.
think this movie is important and it's going to win awards. It has won awards. So, like, if you're not going to take any stand here, you never get to talk about it again, really. In my opinion.
I guess it's a little bit interesting based on the time frame the movie came out as well, because I think when it came to Late Night with the Devil, that news came out before people had seen the movie, right? So there was I think it would have been a little bit different if it was the other way around, like it is the brutal with the brutalist. I feel like a lot of people, especially creators, have already seen the brutalist, and then this AI has come out. That's kind of similar with what happened with Civil War, and I talked about it with Civil War. Those AI generated Civil War posters came out after the movie came out, so I think that's a little bit different.
But
But when it comes,
you can still say people shouldn't see, like, the Brutalist is just, I think, getting a big release, and a lot of people are just now seeing it. Like,
right,
to be real, it was showing in no theaters
I'm
for a
mostly just
long
talking
time.
about creators. That's the like the creators who talked about Late Night with the Devil, the big creators who saw it maybe like 2, 3, 4 weeks ago, who saw it in LA and New York, basically. Um, but when it comes to, I think Adrian Brody is an interesting conversation because even I regret doing this because I talked about, which I guess nobody gives a shit because it's a shitty ass movie that everyone knew was going to be terrible. But what is shown in Flight Risk is an abomination. Like I cannot believe, like it's literally like I type in my computer, show me a snowy hotel, right, and it generates some image. That is what's in Flight Risk, which is wild, and it's the very first shot. But nobody's talking about that besides me, which my video did well, so cool. Um, but the fact of that afterwards, after I mentioned that, right, I talked about Dune, which AI, and I also talked about The Brutalist, and I talked about Amelia Perez, and then Alien Romulus. I know used AI in some way, but what is generative AI and what is AI as a tool? Those need to be different terms because those aren't the same, in my opinion. When it comes to Adrian Brody's voice alteration, I don't necessarily think that is generative AI, right? Which I don't think you think that
No,
either.
that's not generative AI. The generative
Right.
AI usage in the Brutalist is at the end.
Understandable.
The
Understandable.
I think the stuff with his voice. And again, I'm not even I don't like the movie, but I wouldn't tell people not to go see it. I'm just
Yeah.
like, I don't like the movie for a litany of reasons, and I find this exceptionally annoying because of Brady's attitude and because of the way he's presented himself and the film. And I think to ignore that is just like, I don't think the Brody's voice thing is a huge deal, but it's again the way it's presented and the fact that it comes out like this is just strange. And I think it comes across a little bit like disingenuous, where they were trying to hide it. Like, and again, if you want someone who speaks, get a fluent Hungarian speaker. If it's that important, you accept when you're like you said, they want an actor who has a name, right, and
Yeah.
prestige around him. When you do that, you're accepting his limitations. He has Hungarian heritage, but he's not fluent. So if you want perfect Hungarian, the only reason to want perfect Hungarian is to appeal to a Hungarian audience who is not the primary audience. And if you cared enough about that, hire the Hungarian actor. So there are things that you accept because they're human beings. It's a human performance. You're accepting the limitations of the artist, right? So I just think like they tried to have their cake and eat it too there. And again, most of the time I'd be okay, but with the prestige around this movie and the way it's being talked about, I don't think it's fair to ignore. And then there's just straight up generative AI usage, which is it stealing or is it not? Because if it's
Yeah.
stealing, this is the same conversation we had about Late Night with the Devil. It's just stealing with then someone drawing that theft,
Which is
not from their own
it's
mind. Like,
right. It is the exact. It's different, but it's still the exact same thing. I would say
yes,
that like if it was just those AI, which I think people thought at the very beginning, right before Brady came out and gave a little bit of
because of the
clarification.
way, because he was so careful. He was like, in the finished product, there's not
Yes.
generative AI. That was never the accusation. Which
Yeah.
again, if you were just honest, dude, just be real. That's all I'm saying. Like, just I can't understand how people can look at that because that was never what was said. And if you actually looked at the interview from Jansko, that was never what was said. It was just in the idea creation, we put in a prompt of like poor designs from this era, this style of architecture. And then it was just recreated by the artists. Like they didn't create that from their own mind. And that was pulled from someone else's work. So like it just all feels like strange to me. I
Like
don't
we
know.
talked about it. It is. I guess it's kind of interesting for you to ask an artist. Obviously, we aren't ones, but hey, can you draw something poorly? I feel like because
But
that you said that's the
there's tons of people they could have gone to that would have been thrilled to have anything be put into the film, and there are people that would have done that for free. And you made the same
100%.
argument at Late Night with the Devil. You said you could have found someone to do this for cheap, but they said, yeah, we could have, but their artist made the decision to use that tool, and they said we're just going to try this, and it's a small little piece of the movie. But again, it's the disingenuousness of it that really gets under my skin. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think we're kind of talking in circles. I just wanted to talk about it.
No, no. I'm glad you want to talk about it. I guess it's the fact too that I think when that came out, I had not seen The Brutalist. I think. So that's another thing. I was like, I think I literally might have been the exact same day. So it was a whole lot of Brutalist that was getting thrown in my face at one time. But I will say also, I want to like go back to the Adrian Brody thing, because it's interesting because should he get any credit whatsoever for his performance? If I
Oh,
understand, if I
absolutely. No,
yeah,
it's still. I'm not saying it's a bad performance. I still think it's a good performance. I also think, is it much different from what we saw him do in The Pianist? Is it that different? I think he's going back to the well there a bit. And Adrian Brody's made a lot of bad movies in between now and then, but I think he kind of went back to his wheelhouse here, which cool. But I just think there were better performances this year, and especially like it's a stacked category. And I think I don't know. I just think it's something that should be considered when you're looking at who's going to win because those other guys worked really hard too. And like Coleman Domingo, from who is there now, I think it should be Coleman Domingo, and I think his movie is just far more important and it's a more impactful performance. But
well, I guess I mean I know we're like talking around in circles, but I guess it's like when would that information had come out? Like, were they trying to hide it? Like, when is there a certain moment where maybe they talked about his Hungarian accent and they should have mentioned the fact that, yes, it was also me, but who was the one who was blended with him? It was someone on the
who's
film.
the editor?
The
Who
editor.
is
Okay.
Hungarian? David Yancey.
Who's
Yeah.
Hungarian? Yeah. So I think it also, the information did come out around the time or after Oscar voting was already in.
The nomination voting was already done. Yeah.
Okay,
And
so they still
I
have
don't
actual
care if he's
voting rights.
nominated.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, like, I don't think he should win. But I don't think he should win if there was no AI used in his performance. I don't think his performance was better than almost anyone else. So
Well, it's funny
that's
you mentioned that it's so similar to The Pianist because that's people's argument for Kieran Culkin winning. Like he's just acting. I mean, it's just his Succession character in.
I haven't watched Succession.
But you just watched. Why am I blanking on the
Real
film right
Pain.
now? Real
Yeah.
Pain. Yeah.
Yeah, I just watched it. I hated that character so much, dude. That's the kind of person I would talk to for like 15 seconds and then just never talk to again, ever. But
Yeah, but people
yeah.
basically said he's just coming like right off of Succession into a Real Pain and basically is just channeling the exact same character, which people like him, obviously. So
Yeah.
maybe Jeremy Strong, crazy that two Succession actors are both nominated, but good for them. I need to
Yeah.
watch The Apprentice, man. I'm happy for, you were championing Sebastian Stan so much and he like got in there, which was really exciting, but no Daniel Craig though. Bummer.
I haven't really heard anything about it, but was the Sebastian Stan Trump movie, The Apprentice, was that worth watching?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's really good. And it just lays out a lot of what I talked about in that video the other day about like who Roy Cohn was. The basically Roy Cohn is the lawyer that represented Trump and his dad when they got accused. They were discriminating against black people in terms of renting properties to them. And Roy Cohn is the lawyer that got them out of that. And but Roy Cohn was the lawyer for McCarthy during like the Red Scare and when he was going after communists and gay people and Lavender Scare and all that. And like that's what Roy Cohn came from. Then he ended up basically losing his job working as a government lawyer because he went after a lady that did nothing wrong and it came out as a whole thing. But then 20 years later he meets Trump and his style of attack, 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 never admit anything. All of that is really what shaped Trump and kind of made him into who he is. So that's what you see in that movie is kind of him. Um, it's very much almost like a Revenge of the Sith sort of movie, almost where you're like
So
seeing like Darth Vader at the end of the movie, except there's no. Uh, I don't think there's a good turn coming from Donald, but yeah.
interesting. So it's painting the picture that Roy was definitely the one that influenced Donald into his certain characteristics of today.
Donald's style of like his legal style and his political style is Roy Cohn.
Interesting. That
Yeah.
makes me want to watch it even more.
And Roy Cohn's style is Joseph McCarthy.
Nice.
So yeah, it's a good movie. It's yeah, everyone should watch it. And the performance is crazy. And it would have been so easy to do like an SNL, impersonation. He had it's like his mouth posture, like his little mannerisms, and he's not going for this like he's not like making fun of him. He's like actually trying to be him. Like it's just it's quality. It's really good.
Which
I think
people,
Sebastian Stan's pretty underrated.
He's awesome.
what's
Yeah.
wild? He was supposed to be in The Brutalist.
Really?
Really?
He's supposed to have what's his name? Joe Arwin.
Alwyn? Yeah.
Alwyn. He was supposed to have his role, but he literally
Okay.
was in maybe it was Thunderbolts, but he was like in A Different Man, and he's also in The Apprentice. That boy is like working a ton. He just didn't have time to do it.
Yeah, and I mean
Winter Soldier's my favorite MCU character.
yeah, A Different Man kind of just got like I just didn't hear much about it. I don't know why. It was so like one of the best dark comedies I've ever seen. It's so funny. It's so funny to me, but also like obviously has something to say, but like I think people didn't give that its due. And I think people will come back to it maybe and be like, "Oh, this was like very very good." But it's so interesting and there's so much to talk about with that movie and it was skirting this fine line of like being exploitative, right? And it knew that and it deals with that directly. I just think that was so good. But
I didn't hear a thing about A Different Man, like until I saw your video. And Stone, did you do a video on it?
Long time ago. I
Yeah,
did
about
a
Adam
video.
Pearson, right?
Yeah, about Adam
Yeah.
Pearson. It was like
Yeah,
one of my
that's
He's
first
awesome.
I
first
think
videos
that's
I
the
did.
only two
And
times
Adam
I've looked
Pearson
at
is
it.
so good in that movie. Like, could he not have gotten a nomination? Like, looking at supporting actor, like, I
I
mean,
mean,
to not have Clarence
Denzel
Mackinnon and
Washington in
not
it.
have like Edward Norton.
Yeah, I don't like that. I don't get the Edward Norton nomination, to be honest.
Yeah,
Now,
but
now I will say, what's her name? Monica Barbero, I believe is her name. With a complete unknown, I do love that
she
nomination.
was
She was
amazing. She was
fantastic in that
ridiculous.
movie.
Yeah,
She's better than Timmy, in my opinion.
yeah. I wouldn't. I said at least as good. I wouldn't argue if you said she was better. Yeah, it's crazy good, and like it again just didn't get her performance. Like having him in there, and he gets all like kind of the pomp and circumstance around his. Oh, I spent 5 years, doing this and that. What and deserved for sure, but um, she was awesome too.
All right, now that we are holding up our dogs, uh, let's
Where's
talk
yours, Stone?
about. I got my two dogs down here. You want me to pick
Pick one
up
up.
one? Otis, come here.
The
Hold on.
dog's Goodwill podcasting.
Come here. Come here. Come here.
Guys, this could
Hold
be
on.
our most popular episode.
That's a big boy. What's up, buddy?
All right. You guys, do you guys want to talk about part 3?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good.
Dan, you're hesitant. Okay, I need to put this dog down. You're hesitant on part 3, my guy. You're still mulling it over. What are
No,
your
not.
thoughts?
I definitely I enjoyed it a lot. I mean, you guys know I love westerns, right? So like, I feel like this was kind of set up for me to enjoy it.
Would you say it's your favorite?
That's what I'm figuring out. I
That,
don't have an answer to that yet.
all right,
But
that's Connor's bet.
oh, really?
Yeah.
So you thought my least favorite would be the first one?
I didn't guess least favorite. I thought this would be your favorite, though.
Okay.
I honestly thought your order was going to go 3-1-2.
Okay. Yeah, I think what's fun with this is like this to me is just like kind of a glimpse into the potential of Back to the Future, where like you're just seeing something you just get to go to another time and do like a period movie and do a different genre really and just have fun with it and um it's challenging. You have to come up with new ideas, but like the entire idea of like the locomotive and like figuring out how we're gonna like power this car, um it just the possibilities are endless there. um and I enjoyed it, and I think I feel like in my head this is the movie I thought was just bad, and I was just wrong. Also, Mary Steenburgen, I think she's fun in this. She's a good actor.
I'd agree.
For
I
some
always think
reason,
of
I
her.
thought that was going to be Jennifer, like the actress who played Jennifer. Like it was going to be like a past version of her. I'm like, she's way too young to be with Christopher Lloyd. I don't think that's going to work.
Like I said, it'd also be weird if they brought back Marty's girlfriend and fall in love with them.
I also thought, I mean, that's kind of like a mom situation from the first film. They wanted to throw it back.
Yeah, but I think when you're looking at Wilson's performances in these movies, this is the one that is the most that stands alone, right? That's the most unique. Um,
So good.
yeah, and
Uh,
and maybe his best actual performance. That's not just like full cartoony ridiculousness. I think like
well, he goes
I mean it is
6, and then he looks at his buddy. He's like 7.
yeah,
That's good.
he's a funny guy, but I did like this.
Oh man, he's so
And
good. I will
this
say,
this is Doc's movie, although it is great for Marty, but like it's really Doc's movie.
This is like the only movie that I have like one big gripe with
what?
in these. And it's literally for the fact that they take like an entire sequence to just explain that there's no, was it uranium or plutonium to like make the time machine work in the time that Doc is in. And then at the end, he's able to make a time machine to come back to the future. And he like they just are like, oh, it's steam powered. That's my big gripe.
Just adapt with the time, my guy.
Again, I just think stuff like that. Can we really critique these movies? Are all just complete bullshit. Like,
I mean, yeah, I'm with
I
you.
will say
That's just
he
my
has the
big gripe is they like went out of their way to be like, oh, he can't do anything to help himself.
yeah. Then
Like,
when the time is right, it's just the solution is there. No, I
yeah,
get it. That is lazy. I hear you.
because for me, I think it's a perfect send off for Doc. He's talked in the previous movies about how he would love to be in the Wild West. So I think it's a good send off for him to just stay where he wanted to be anyway with the woman that he loves. And we could just write that off and, like, yeah, let your imagination run. Did he end up getting shot or did he live a long, happy life, have a family?
Yeah.
I mean, I will say that what adds some believability to them being able to create another time machine is the fact that his now partner wife is also a scientist. So maybe she, thought of something that he didn't think of, and then together they were able to build a time machine without plutonium. That's what I kind of thought of. I will say, you said the perfect send off. It's a little bit anticlimactic, I will say. For me, that one specific moment is when, she is Claire's like jumping on the train and trying to get to him and he's on the hoverboard and everything. And she jumps on the hoverboard and Marty's like, oh, cool. And him and Doc have made this plan to go back together. And Doc's just like, see ya. And didn't even like try to go with them. Like, I thought he was gonna like jump in the car or something. But it's just like, no, we're satisfied. And they just like peel away on the hoverboard. I wasn't
One,
expecting that.
I think it's more believable that they just peel away and didn't catch up to the car on the hoverboard. But two, Doc was even saying, like, I'm going to stay back here and with Clara. And then Clara and him broke up because, she like didn't believe him that he was a time traveler. So then he was like, all right, well, I guess I'll go back to my time then. And then now that Clara's back and like willing to like stay with him and believe him.
Not technically. He was already going to go back to his time even before Clara didn't believe him. He was hoping. I thought that he was hoping that he could bring her with him. Like he didn't care about the ramifications anymore.
Yeah,
He
I
was
thought
already
it was
not.
after that he told her. And then that's when he gets like real drunk and depressed.
Yeah, but he. I think what
Off
you're
one
saying
shot.
is,
What
yeah, off the one shot.
Yeah.
I thought what you were saying was basically the reason why he decided to go back to the future is because he told Clara that he was from the future.
Am I not
And
remembering
then
properly?
no, because he was already going to make up his mind that he was going to go back to the future, and he was telling Clara goodbye. Like he was literally telling her goodbye, and she's like, "I don't believe you. Like the reasons you're saying, like you're not telling me the truth right now. Tell me the truth. Like
Right.
why are you trying to leave me?" And then he tells her the truth, and then she slaps him in the face and is like, "How dare you like disrespect me this way?"
You're right.
So, in a sense, I thought he had already made up his mind to go to the future, and I just pictured the two of them would go to the future together with Marty. So when they peeled away on the hoverboard, I was like, "Oh shoot, Marty's just going by himself." So I should have known though. I didn't. I should have predicted the fact that they would come back at the very end. I don't know why I didn't, but I was just like, "Oh, Doc's gone," and I was like, "Oh, Doc's back."
One thing I wanted to say with this is one thing I like about this movie is one of the dumbest things about the second movie is the entire "oh, you're a chicken" thing with Marty. Like it's so stupid, and it's just used to like as a plot device essentially to like make whatever they need to have happen, which like I get, but it's just like, dude, grow up. Like, why do you care? Like, it doesn't
We get
matter.
character
Like,
development in this one.
yeah, exactly, and that's what this movie does well is you see him understanding that like it's not always worth it, right? Like, and I think that's interesting because these movies, the first two movies, really have been kind of built on this like, and not to get too, these don't really need to be broken down like this, but like the two movies before this are kind of built on like masculinity in a way where it's just like, oh, you stand up to the bully and punch him in the face, and then it's just like that kind of mentality. And I think this is interesting because it kind of subverts all of that, and it's just like, yeah, sometimes it's just like not worth it, or there's other ways to think around a situation, or like deal with something, and every challenge made to you, you don't have to like address. Like it's just sometimes there's more important stuff. I think that's interesting because it's not necessarily the way the first two movies have been operating, and I appreciated that.
Everything with like the chicken and he's like calls him what a yellow belly in this.
Yeah,
That wasn't in the first movie, right? That's something they add. I think that is something they added to the second movie purposely to give him the characterization that he has in this movie. I think that's why it's in the second movie at all. Is because they knew what they were going to do in this third one. So they're like, how can we, put that in the 1950s?
yeah, and I think it's not in the first movie, but like the ideas of like standing up to bullies and like always taking it like that kind of stuff is kind of like at the core of what these movies are about. Um, so like yeah, it's kind of more so shown with George than Marty.
It is in the first one once.
When's that?
It's in the cafeteria scene when he like turns around and sees Biff kind of like flirting with Lorraine, or not really
Like
flirting,
assaulting
but
her?
grabbing her. Yeah.
Jesus. Biff,
Um,
Biff needs to be like literally put in like a solitary confinement. He's completely unhinged.
he's a menace to society. But yeah, it's in the cafeteria scene. Biff says it to him. I just
He
looked
calls
it
him
up.
chicken.
Huh?
He calls him chicken.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
But still, I mean, like in the first one, it's more of a throwaway line. Where in the second and third, they kind
Is
of
it?
put
Yeah.
more
They
exaggeration.
go back to it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So where does this sit for you, Connor, revisiting these?
In my third spot.
Okay. Is there other stuff besides what you mentioned earlier?
No, I just have more entertainment with the first two. Like the first one, like is a 5 star. The second one for me is a 4.5, and this one I think is a 3.5, 4. It's somewhere right around there. I'm still deciding. I haven't actually logged any of these on Letterboxd yet.
So, if I'm remembering correctly, the finale of the first movie, which I guess it doesn't have to be this grandiose thing, is just the punch that Marty's dad gives to Biff, right? And he's like, I can finally go home. I guess they do. There's the whole thing of they have to get the DeLorean and they're trying to go, back to the future, which is a way, the lightning bolt hits the clock tower and everything like that. But compared to the second and the third movie, what is like there's like chase sequences kind of that are going on, like especially with like Biff in the car in the second one. That went on is way longer than I thought it was going to, and it was really exhilarating. And the end of this is so awesome. Like they're jumping on the trains, and I'm like, dude, this fucking rocks. And I thought it was kind of incredible, and it's really cool to see how far this franchise has gone since the first movie. So I don't know. I guess I prefer more of that. Like it's so cool to see, the DeLorean getting pushed by a train in the 1800s. It really is.
Yeah, would you guys have wanted to see more of these movies if they had been made like immediately after this?
No.
No, because I like that it's still there's three of these movies, which I think is what really makes them special. Even though there's three movies, they feel very contained. They kind of feel like one cohesive story. Like it's nonstop. There's
Watching them
no
back to back was awesome. Yeah,
yeah
it's
yeah
well. It's a good tight like full complete narrative and with good arcs for these characters. I think.
yeah. So the fact that you can only do that for so long. So if at the end of this movie, if as soon as Clara and Doc fly through the future, they go to like accidentally go to like medieval times. I would have been like, okay, this is now Marty's got to come back and save them again. All these like knights are like destroying their train or something. There's no plutonium in Europe or something.
Yeah.
I think one of my favorite throwaway lines in this entire movie is like at the end when Doc is drunk and Marty's like, "Why do we have to cut these things so close?" Like I just like the self-awareness of these movies.
Yeah, they're very self-aware, I think. Which is good. I mean, when you're making something that's like goofy like this, like you don't want to take yourself too seriously as a movie. So
I was gonna say that's why one of the reasons I love the Scream franchise so much is they're very aware of what they are.
yeah, The second one of these feels a little bit screamy, which I liked. I was actually thinking about that.
I kind of see what you mean. Yeah.
Um, I wanted to say I just think what they decided to do with Doc here is really nice because like you don't think about the fact that like I mean I think when you're dealing with any kind of scientific pursuit, oftentimes that life is incredibly lonely and like that loneliness is kind of like a defining factor of those individuals and like despite what they might be able to contribute to society, like they sacrifice something from their own life to do that. So I think like him being able to move past like while Marty's being able to move past like his ego or whatever it is that drives him to always have to accept challenges or insults, whatever. Like Doc is kind of moving past his need to always be working or creating something or thinking and actually worrying about like his own happiness and like being able to find fulfillment in another person rather than like whatever scientific pursuit he's going after. I think that's a nice um just a nice little story for him, a nice conclusion for his character, especially as an older guy.
Yeah. Yeah. That was very well said.
And you don't see like I don't know, you don't see a lot of love stories often about like older folks. Like and again, I mean like Mary Steenburgen is not old in this, so I don't know.
No, she did not look old at all.
He's not. I
she
mean,
she's not Jennifer's age, I will say. So I was kind of like happier with that. But I was gonna say, Dan, one thing I love, I think that's really effective is what we've talked about, the fact that Doc really gets no characterization at all for the first and the second movie. Like you know nothing about him, you know nothing about how him and Marty came to be friends, but the fact that he never mentions a family, he's not really concerned about that at all. You can kind of infer that there is no one for he doesn't have one. Like it's literally just him by himself, and we focus so much on Marty's family that it's really a nice surprise that the third movie is about him getting a family.
yeah. Yeah, another thing I wanted to briefly mention is um and especially right now, I mean when you're seeing I think a lot of times the way like immigrants and people like that are being painted and the way they're being treated. Um this movie first of all establishes Doc as like a German immigrant. He said he was a von Braun and his family had to change their name. So it establishes that. But also seeing Marty his like relatives as like Irish immigrants.
Yeah.
And I, like it's a little subtle thing, but just understanding like these are very American classic movies from a classic American director, and just laying out the fact that these are two descendants of immigrants, I think is a really nice thing. And given the time this is set, and given you're dealing with a genre in a western that is oftentimes defined by like there's some questionable stuff in westerns, and a lot of times they're dealing with Native Americans and kind of the establishment of the country and the taking of land, which it's all very murky, right? And but this movie decides to just acknowledge its characters as people that were from somewhere else too. Um, just trying to make it. It's a little thing, but it's something I appreciated.
I was
Yeah.
like, speaking of murky, I will say the one money shot in this is when the DeLorean is like peeling away from the Indians on the horses, and it's like that's just cool. I'm sorry, seeing a car in that kind of setting is just like really dope.
Yeah,
And they knew that too. They literally like, all right, this is the first thing you're going to see when you go back to the past, when you go back to the 1800s. Just a bunch of them chasing this car, which is wild. I love that like they didn't like acknowledge the car at all. We never see them go, what the fuck was that? They just peel away.
They're being chased away by, I forget what he calls them, but Americans.
yeah,
I think one of my favorite little like things in this is like, yeah, Doc is in the past, but like he's still making inventions that just like are better. Like he has this big ass machine that makes a single ice cube. But like my favorite one that's not addressed is when we first see him in the Wild West, and his gun has this like massive sniper scope on it. And like at the time, like, dude, that advantage is insane. Like, because no one had scopes on their guns back then. And he's like, I can hit a flea off of a dog's back from 500 yards away.
Yeah, it helps you understand like why they don't just try to like overwhelm him, or like why they maybe are a little more have a little more respect for him as an opponent, which is good writing. I think there's a lot of just good writing in this movie. It's like little things that they didn't have to think about, but like just things that they cover up, which is
100%.
I appreciate.
I say what you said, like the inventions. There's like also one scene where it's cool because they have to, or they're trying to use pieces that they would find in the 1800s, and he's like building a breakfast
Yeah,
basically, and it's cool to like watch it and be like, okay, obviously that didn't happen back then, but the filmmakers and the people writing the script have to like piece together how this could be plausible. Like, how could you get a 21st or 20th century breakfast in the 18th century
yeah.
And
or
like
no
the ice
19th century?
machine he has, like huge contraption for a
Or
piece of ice.
what about when Marty first gets there and he's like, "Yeah, I'll take some water," and it's just brown and
Yeah,
murky.
that's funny. That's
That was really good. That was really good. I will say one thing was a little bit distracting to me, is Mad Dog Tenon, right? Biff. He's really, I guess it's dirt. Like the dude has like kind of like blackface the entire time. Like
Very
his
close.
face, it was really distracting for me. Like even more than any of his other goons. I guess it's just grease, but he's just like
I mean, people would
completely
feel like
blacked out.
really dirty. I mean, that makes
And I
sense.
get that. And I get
Yeah,
that. But
my
there's
wife
like,
pointed that out, and I was like, I think it's just because it's the Wild West, and he's just kind of filthy at all times. But I was like,
yeah,
it's tiptoeing that line.
it's like never a moment at all when he's clean. So yeah, I was just like, no, that's an interesting choice. That it's just the entire time. But I know what they were going for. But I thought it was just maybe that is a way to make him like a little bit different than his goons as well.
There's a lot of moments in these movies that are like kind of like you raise an eyebrow, like in the second movie with like the Japanese like boss. I'm just like, bro, what's this
Yeah.
accent you're doing?
Are you talking about
Uh,
the robot?
no,
Remember
when
when?
No,
he gets
number two,
fired by his boss, who's like a Japanese guy, and he's like
Uh,
really,
after
oh
Needles
yeah.
yeah,
fucks with him.
I said there's
yeah,
also a
like
moment
when his
too on the screen of the robot at the restaurant. They're like showing two different like
yeah,
culinary
what
choices.
yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
don't know. I don't know what was going on that screen.
It's weird. Yeah, but it's the 80s. That's what it is.
I don't like the '80s that much. They suck.
No, the 80s suck, man. I'm telling you, the worst.
What is
Reagan.
your what is your favorite movie from the '80s? Do you? I mean, it's maybe that's. I mean, there's so many of them, so it might be hard just to
I'm
rack one
actually
off.
no.
Breakfast Club.
I'll pull up my. I'm looking at my letterbox right now.
That's what I'm doing right now. But like off the top of my head, Breakfast Club is the first one that came to mind.
Your rating.
This might be a good way to close this out, even though this movie came out in 1990. And I said
Um,
at the and I said at the beginning of the episode, like we're talking
oh,
about these iconic films from the '80s, and I was incorrect because one of them came out in the '90 in 1990. But we
if
can
you
go with
want me
that.
to choose a franchise, I'll say Empire.
It
Reigns
was
supreme.
90 and 91 Stone, I think, for 2 and 3.
89 and
89.
90.
Okay, gotcha. Sorry,
But
Connor, I cut you off.
oh, you're good. Empire Strikes Back will be like reigning supreme for me. But if you want me to pick one that's not a franchise, I might say Full Metal Jacket.
So, I mean, I said I don't like the 80s. Looking at my letterbox, there was a lot of good movies. Like King of Comedy is probably my favorite. Um, Cinema Paradiso, Glory, Amadeus, The Thing, Do the Right Thing, Ran, Das Boot, Tim Burton's Batman.
Aren't you a big
Um,
RoboCop guy?
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
all the Indiana Jones came out in the '80s too. You fuck with Indiana Jones, Dan?
Except I don't like Temple of Doom, but otherwise, yeah.
We should
Um,
do an indie episode.
Hey, hey, she's so annoying in that movie.
there's a lot of great movies: Moonstruck, The Fly, Elephant Man, After Hours, Rain Man, Henry V, Terminator, The Untouchables, Blade Runner, Last Temptation of Christ. Yeah,
Fun fact about Rain Man. A lot of it was shot here in Cincinnati, and where my wife's and my rehearsal dinner was, the room we had reserved for it was called the Rain Man Room.
nice.
Literally, it was an Italian restaurant.
There you go. I'll just go with one of my favorite movies I grew up with was The Goonies. I love The Goonies.
Yeah.
It's so good.
Aren't they
Uh,
remaking?
yeah, they're making like a sequel, and I already know what they're gonna do, and it's gonna be so pissed because like the phrase of that film is Goonies never say die, so they're gonna put that on the poster for the sequel. I I will bet $1,000 they will do that, and it's really going to make me mad. But that's fun. And I think they're going to reboot it too. They're definitely not going. They'll probably cast like Sean Astin or Josh Brolin's in that movie too. Um, but they'll probably recast a bunch of other kids and have it set in like San Francisco or something. I don't know.
That's one of those things I haven't watched in so long, and I just could not give less of a shit about. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Like that's the kind of 80s stuff where I'm just kind of that's so cute. Getting pawed up. Yeah, I don't know. Like that style of 80s, I'm just like, no, this turns my brain off immediately. But
Well, I mean, even the kid actors though in the Goonies is so good. Like you have Ke Kwan, you have Sean Astin, you have obviously Josh Brolin, but then Corey Feldman. Like those are really solid actors for like children.
yeah, I'll rewatch it.
So it's really good. I love it. Anyways, would that be our recommendation? We recommend an '80s movie at the end of the episode.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine.
I got
That's
a
fun.
different one, but
You got a different one?
yeah, I'm gonna go with the recommendation I've been thinking about all week.
Okay.
That's fine. I'll subtract that idea. This came last. Back to the Future came out in the '90s anyway. So
Do you guys have any? I mean, I feel like we kind of touched on everything here, but do you guys have any closing thoughts on these movies or a third movie at all?
I don't think so. I think after our conversation, I'm gonna have this one at a 4.
Yeah.
Like I said, I think these movies are substantially less good. I don't know if that was great phrasing. If Thomas F. Wilson is not in this, I did going into this, I did not know about him and how much impact he had on these stories, and the fact that he, besides Doc, really, and Marty, he is the other character that or actor that is carried throughout all of these films, and I love that because he's so different than the two of them, but then also he's so many different variations rather than the two of them. Like even though Michael J. Fox is going, "Oh, Marty, what are you doing here?" I can't do a Irish accent, but he's not really doing that much. He's not really a character. I would say he's kind of just like an onlooker, like, "Oh, what is this Clint Eastwood going to do here?" But yeah, Wilson just becomes a different person every single movie, and I really enjoy that. Especially at the end of the second or first one and the beginning of the second one, where he's like, "Yes, Mr. McFly, I will do anything you say." It's like I like that.
I will say his extending baseball bat is fucking sick.
Yeah.
All right, what's
Yeah.
that recommendation? What you got?
Oh, actually, I'm gonna go last. I gotta step away real quick.
Oh,
Okay.
well, okay. Let's see what we got. You know what? I'll just recommend if anybody cares about Back to the Future and has been listening to the podcast up to this moment, I'll recommend the documentary. Maybe you have watched it, maybe you haven't, but it was really good. I said in my review, the one thing I love about the documentary, so still a Michael J. Fox story, which is on Apple TV Plus, is I didn't realize how connected he was still with his family. I feel like that's something very rare to see in Hollywood. Is like a family that is together of a star that was absolutely massive. He met his wife Tracy on the set of Family Ties. I think the second season of Family Ties after he made Back to the Future, and they just got married right after, and they've been married like ever since, and they have 4 kids together, and they all like love their dad and like are there for him, but they're not like, oh, my dad, it's so sad. My dad has Parkinson's. They just treat him like a normal guy, and it was really cool to watch them, you know, exchange with each other or have conversations with each other. And I said in my review, yeah, life sucks. Obviously, what happened to him is just unfortunate because Parkinson's disease usually affects people who are like 70.
Yeah.
And I mean, he got it in 1990, so I believe he would have been 29 years old, I believe. And he tried to hide it for 7 years too. And he like got super addicted to both pills and alcohol, trying to hide it as best he could. It's just interesting hearing him talk about that and the effects that had on his wife and his children. But yeah, the fact that even though his life was obviously this is a terrible thing that happened, I saw good in his life, like with his family. And like a little spoiler, but like the closing shot is his family, and I think that's like what the documentary is about, like showing you the good, even though there is like obviously a very prominent bad. But yeah, it was good. Also, I will say I still haven't watched it yet, but I recommend if you get Apple TV, watch Severance. Have you watched any of the second season yet, Dan?
Yeah, they sent me the first and second episodes before, and then they sent me 3 and 4. So I think I'm watching those tonight. So I'm excited.
I haven't watched the first two episodes yet. I heard it's incredible. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's still good. The first 2 episodes did a nice job of like showing you kind of what happened at the end of the first season while they were out, and kind of sets it up nicely. So I'm curious to see what happens. Um,
I saw somewhere that that's like been watched more than like the morning show. It's basically their biggest show they've had since Ted Lasso, which is super cool, which I didn't expect.
yeah, it's a great show. Ben Stiller did a nice job there. I'll give my recommendation, I guess. What do I want to recommend? I mean, we're talking about stuff from the '80s. If anyone hasn't watched the Transformers movie from 1984, was it four? Is that right?
That's right.
Yeah, 1986. Excuse me. That's on YouTube. Just I would say go watch it, or you can buy it or whatever, or rent it. But it's so much fun, and I think like it's just one of the best Transformers projects, hands down, and very '80s, but something I enjoy. It's only 90 minutes, so.
And there's
And
like an
Orson Welles
updated
is
looking version of it too on YouTube that I did not watch. So
what's it?
there's like they updated how it looks. Like it looks much nicer. I
Yeah,
did not watch that one. I watched like the classic kind of grainy one.
yeah. So that's what I'll recommend.
Okay. I have been thinking about this movie since I watched it on Monday. I haven't watched anything other than Back to the Future, but A Real Pain from this year with Jesse Eisenberg. That movie fucking rocked me. I
What
sat.
about it, Connor?
What's up?
What about it? What talk about it a little
So
bit.
I don't know if this has ever happened, but literally when I finished the movie, I sat there for an hour and just like stared at the wall. Not only does it so for the premise for our audience who hasn't seen it, Jesse Eisenberg and his brother Kieran Culkin, their grandma just passed, and they're going to Poland, to like kind of go see where she was raised, and actually went to a concentration camp. But so not only did my grandma pass last year and then one the year prior, so that hit me hard in the beginning, but also the scene where they're on the roof and Kieran Culkin and them are talking about how Kieran Culkin tried to take his own life. I've talked to my wife about this multiple times this week about this recommendation, but I have actually also tried to take my own life. Failed, obviously. And looking at my daughter and now a son on the way, couldn't be more grateful that it was a failed attempt. So I think that's my new number one movie of the last year.
Nice.
Nice. Yeah, it's funny you say that. I just watched it this week too, and I enjoyed it. I had not watched it for. I mean, it's sitting on Hulu too. If anyone hasn't seen it, I would definitely recommend it. I think Jesse Eisenberg was amazing in that, and I think Kieran Culkin's performance has been talked about a lot more. I think that's not a shame, but I just think Jesse was just as good.
Yeah,
I
the
think I
scene where
agree
he's
with
sitting,
you.
that scene where he's sitting at the table and just like venting to all those people, I was like, damn it, that was
That was
like the moment for me.
Yeah, and
yeah.
it's interesting because some of their dialogue bothered me a little bit in terms of feeling a bit forced and a bit like stage play-y kind of, but at the same time, I think they both feel like very real people. Like I've definitely met people like both of them, um, and I appreciatated that aspect of it.
You only
Um,
talked to Kieran Culkin for 15 minutes, whoever
nah,
you met that was
instant
like
instant
that.
avoid. Yeah,
Dude, I
all right,
just
man, cool. See you.
I saw Kieran Culkin was nominated for it, and I hadn't seen anything about the movie really, so I was like, oh yeah, let's check it out.
To me, I think it's more impressive that, or more, it stands out more because it's kind of annoying, but he's like out of all the categories, he's the one category where they're like, yeah, he's gonna win it. Basically, he's like
You
won
think so?
almost every. What was that?
That's just said. You think so?
Yeah, Kieran Culkin's almost won like every Best Supporting Actor
Okay.
nomination. So it's like Zoe Saldana maybe, and then with Best Actress and Best Actor, it's a little bit more up in the air. But I think it's even more impressive and more exciting for me that Jesse Eisenberg was nominated for his screenplay because this is the second movie that he's made and directed and written. So I think it's just like the start of his career. He's
Okay.
just such a unique guy. I mean, you can tell that he is I'm very much an introvert, and it's cool to see like an introvert in this business, like being very passionate about performing like that. But yeah, also I mean, what they hint on in that movie that really, affects me, but it's not an uncommon thing, but unfortunately, it is something that is forgotten that Kieran Culkin like screams at in the film, but the desensitization of all the horrific acts that have happened, not only like in Poland and Europe, but like all around the world. People just like take pictures with shit that's just horrific, right? Because this is history, but you have to like process actually what happened here and not just like do it for social media clout or do it just because it'd be fun or interesting. Actually think and process and why are you here? What was here? Kind of a thing. Like those moments like really worked on me.
Yeah.
And I think what you're talking about there is what the Zone of Interest did with its ending, and
Oof.
I think that was the probably the best moment of the movie.
Yeah.
I
And
still need to
taking
see
that
that.
and then turning it into just something as mundane as someone walking around with a broom, like I thought that was really effective. And I think that movie, I don't think it's, I think the movie has problems. And I think it could have been almost a short, but like it's still effective and I respected it more than I liked it. Um, yeah, I mean, I don't want it's another conversation, but I agree with what you're saying. Um, it was a good category, but it's funny because it's like only a good category really in the top six, and after that, it's just like because it was Kieran Culkin, Guy Pearce. That's like one of them will probably win, probably Kieran Culkin. Then Yura Borisov, who was like the best part of Honora in my opinion, and
I
then
agree.
Norton, who I would have dropped out, and then Jeremy Strong. That's in likelihood of winning, and then Clarence Macklin was in the sixth spot. Then you have like Denzel, Stanley Tucci, who was bad, I thought. Jonathan Bailey, Peter Sarsgaard for September 5, and then uh, Mark Eidelstein from Honora, who was really good. Um,
Wait, can you actually see who was like in sixth, seventh, and eighth?
that's based on the odds to win. That's basically what it was. It was Macklin,
Oh,
Denzel, Stanley Tucci, Bailey, Sarsgaard. Um,
Jonathan Bailey being that's the most insane thing I've ever heard, but it's fine. Like I get Cynthia Erivo and I get Ariana Grande. I don't understand Jonathan Bailey at all. Bro is like barely in the movie and he's just dancing through life when he's in it. So
yeah,
sure.
I honestly thought he was one of the weaker parts of the movie, and I got shit for saying that, but like I just didn't think he was that strong. But yeah. Anyway,
So
well, I'm just going off. But Yura Borisov really was awesome. That's such a good performance.
unexpected too. Just the way that the movie like keeps on going and you're like, shit, like is he gonna become like more of a focus? And then you're like, oh man.
Yeah, yeah. Anyway, thanks for sharing that too, Connor.
Yeah.
I think like personal stuff like that is one of the reasons that movies are important, right? Because it just like that type of emotional connection, I think, is what I always try to kind of look for, and it's the reason that some things will speak to people more than others. It's just like, can you relate? But I think ideally, too, movies will also be able to create empathy or create that emotional connection in places where you maybe even haven't had the experience, and it's just like you're able to see into something else, um, and to something into something else that someone else has been through. So I think that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah. That's not a story I've shared a lot. Like maybe a handful of people know.
Yeah.
Um, but I do think, I'm in a much better place now. And I think, if anyone who is listening needs to reach out, I'm always willing to talk, but there is help out there. I mean, BetterHelp is a good option. I've been on there before, but now I'm doing it through the VA, which has been much better than BetterHelp for me. But find something that works for you.
Yeah,
Because
yeah,
it's
yeah.
better, hindsight, looking back 5 years. 5 years? Yeah. Like, I can't even imagine, even considering that now and not meeting my daughter or son, not marrying my wife, not owning this little shithead back here.
Bro, we wouldn't
Yeah.
have Goodwill podcasting. There
Exactly.
Yes,
you go.
most importantly.
Stone's really thinking about the important things here.
Yeah. Yeah, we would be doing this right now.
I mean, Stone's not, Stone's right. I mean, this is like one of, my favorite things every week is getting to go with you guys and just bullshitting about movies for our, 35 listeners.
Well, hopefully it's not only one of your favorite things, but also our listeners. And thanks everybody for tuning in this week to Goodwill Podcasting. Check us out wherever we are on social media. I've never plugged us before, but hey, sure, go ahead. If there's one random person that follows us on Spotify or on YouTube or any other streaming sites that don't know, we all do social media content. So look us up. Obviously, our names are here on the screen. But yeah, thanks for listening. Back to the Future trilogy, really solid. Incest, cowboys, and Biff. I mean, what more could you want? But yeah, appreciate it though. Until next time, until next week, just go outside, sit on a park bench, touch some grass, call your friends, and we'll see you then.